have seen a rough cut of the movie back in June, and then I have close friends who are among the producers who have been watching very closely, and we're all very happy with the way the movie has turned out. Of course, they only have 2 hours to work with. I have about 12 in the reading of the books, so obviously they had to leave out many things, but this is as good a version of Ender's Game as Hollywood could ever be expected to produce. What I had to do with it was, before the film was approved and funded, I wrote script after script just to prove that it could be filmed. Ender's Game is a very interior novel. It takes place entirely through Ender's point of view, and getting inside someone's head is something that film cannot do. So we had to find strategies for externalizing the events, and so I wrote scripts until they believed that the film could be made. But then when Gavin Hood was hired as director, he wanted to write a script, and it's been his scripts that they've worked with ever since. So my part was done. I stepped away, and people who actually knew how to make movies moved on from there. I think that television offers some real advantages. For one thing, with television you can stretch it out over enough time to cover the whole story. Game of Thrones has been a brilliant adaptation to television because I just needed that amount of space. You could never have turned that into a feature film. But also television has intimacy that the big film does not. When you have to fill the big screen with effects, only a certain kind of film is going to work well. But with television there's an intimacy, there's a smallness. It focuses on the people, which really would work well for my kind of story. What I enjoy is doing different things. I don't think anybody should do the same job for more than 10 years. You start to think that that's who you are. And while I only make enough money to live on from my novel writing, I really would hate it if that's all I were able to do. So I do all kinds of other things because they interest me and because they make me feel like I'm not trapped as just a writer. I tell my writing students that their job is to learn everything about everything. You never achieve that, but you should be trying to do that. And one of the most important things for writers to do is to live many lives, to work in different jobs, to meet people of every social class. If all you ever meet are university professors and fellow students, and then you immediately become a writer and you only associate with other writers and artists, you're not going to be able to write about the full range of human experience. So I think it's important that writers never insulate themselves by associating only with people involved in the arts. I would rather be friends with a fireman, an accountant, a farmer, than with another writer, just because the other writer isn't going to teach me anything. I already know writers. I need to know other people. I have learned a lot from other writers, both from good writers who provide good examples and from bad writers who show me what the mistakes are, and as I try to imagine how to fix their problems, I learn how to solve my own. My books don't tell writers anything that you can't figure out completely on your own, but maybe by reading what I've written they can speed up the process, they can take a shortcut to achieving the mastery that they want to achieve. Also, as I was writing Character and Viewpoint, in English at least, there was no serious treatment of why you would use first person versus third person, or why you would use different viewpoints, and so I really had to figure it out for myself. And in the process of writing the book, I learned so much myself that I was already repaid, even if no one else ever read the book. Well, the odd thing is that the working frontier, the practical frontier, is that fantasy has trees, science fiction has sheet metal and rivets. So indeed with Pathfinder it starts among the trees with a child who is a trapper, but it very quickly moves into a world where we realize that it's dominated by people who came there from space. There are robots who pass for human. and mostly it deals with time travel. The real game I'm playing is I'm rejecting all of the old rules of time travel from all the rest of science fiction, and I threw them out, and I'm developing an entirely new set of rules. And the fun thing is watching readers follow this path with me, and they seem to be enjoying it as much as I am. Brand new metaphysics. Well, this actually began when Marvel Comics was adapting Ender's Game and other books to comic form. And we talked about how what we really needed was a good comic book story, a big adventure story, space war, war with aliens, something that would illustrate well instead of all being interior and character. Well, we still have the characters, we still have the interiors, but we have the big grand adventure here by going back in time to the era before, to the war before Ender is even born. But we created it as comic books first, and then the scriptwriter, who worked very closely with me as we developed the story, then has gone ahead and joined with me in adapting those comic books into novel form. Of course, when you make a novel out of a comic book, you have to expand it greatly, and he and I worked very closely on the new things that we were inventing. I'm very proud of this book and the 2 that follow it. Actually, I should say the 5 that follow it, because we have the first Formic War, 3 volumes, and then the second Formic War is 3 more volumes, which adds so much more information than is hinted at in Ender's Game. So Aaron and I are really enjoying this series. Well, since movies require huge amounts of money that I don't have, you'd have to ask the people with money whether they want to make my movies. But what I'm working on right now, I'm writing the 3rd of the Pathfinder books, the final Pathfinder book. This one is not going to go on and on forever. Then I'll be writing the 3rd of the Mither Mages series, that began with Lost Gate and Gate Thief. Then I will be revisiting the Ender universe. I'm going to be creating a new series of sequels to Ender's Game that tell about what happens to, the first book is called Children of the Fleet, and it's what happens to kids who are in battle school after the war is over. They're no longer training for war, they're now training to be colonizers and explorers, but they still use the battle room in different ways. New games are being played there, and they end up involved in combat with people from Earth, so it's not a peaceful time, but in a way it's the truest sequel to Ender's Game. It's most like Ender's Game in the milieu that it takes place in. After that, I definitely intend to finish the Alvin Maker series. I now see how to make... I was afraid that the last book was going to be longer than all the other books combined. And so I found a way to do it much more briefly. And so now I can write it. So we'll see. I hope that within 2 years I'll have that one done as well. And then if I'm still alive, we'll see what other books I get to do.